So Adarsh, you are from Barabanki, Uttar Pradesh.
Yes,
So you have done your BSc and uh, mathematics, physics, and chemistry, PMS.
yeah.
Yeah, PMC. Okay. So and you have also secured many scholarship also. So let me start with first of all asking you, since you have also done MSc in mathematics.
No, sir.
No, BSc in mathematics. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Uh, so, what is a mathematics day? Which day is mathematics day celebrated in this country? Can you tell me?
So it is celebrated on the birthday of Mr. Srinivas Ramanujan. Uh,
Okay.
Sorry, sir, I'm not able to recall the exact date. I apologize.
Okay. So National Mathematics Day. Yes, you are right. On the birthday of Ramanujan, the famous Indian mathematician, and it is on 22nd of December, and it was announced by whom? Can you tell me? Remember that? Who announced the National Mathematics Day?
Sorry, sir, I'm not able to.
Okay, it was the earlier Prime Minister of this country, Manmohan Singh. He announced it.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ramanujan, if you have heard about Ramanujan, can you tell me what is Hardy Ramanujan number?
Yes, sir. The number is 1729.
Yes. So what is the speciality about 1729?
So it is the number which has a specialty that it is the sum of two distinct pairs of cubes. Which
Mhm.
the first pair is 1 and 12, and the second pair is 10 and 9.
Okay. So is there any history associated with this 1729?
Yes, sir. There's a story behind it.
Yes.
It is said that when Professor Hardy went to meet Mr. Ramanujan, he was ill.
Yeah.
So when he went to meet Ramanujan, he told him that the taxi to which he had traveled, it has
Yes.
a rather dull number. It said
Yeah.
the number was 1729. But Ramanujan replied that the number is not dull. In fact, it's the only number which is the sum of two pairs of two.
Yeah. Absolutely correct. Okay, so you are also fond of watching documentaries. Okay, so which is the latest documentary you might have watched, and what are the takeaways from that documentary?
So recently, I watched the documentary. It was titled "Period," end of sentence. This documentary won the Oscars recently, and this documentary was centered around Hapur village of Uttar Pradesh. And the theme was how women face the problem of menstrual stigma, and how Mr. Padman of India, Arunachalam Ranganathan, he revolutionized the entire village by introducing the machine through which sanitary napkins could be produced at a much cheaper cost.
Okay, so what are the takeaways you can say from this documentary?
The first takeaway was that the woman empowerment determines the uh, entire hygiene of a region. For example, before the introduction of sanitary napkins, women had the problem of malnutrition, and children also had a greater tendency of being malnourished. But after the introduction of sanitary napkins, the malnutrition rate of children declined very sharply. So, first takeaway was that the maternal health is intrinsic to children's health.
Yeah.
Second takeaway was that women empowerment needs financial autonomy also. So when this machine was introduced, the women themselves became entrepreneurs and they own their self-help group. And now they sell their sanitary napkins to the nearby town and they have gained empowerment also.
Okay. So the IPL have been postponed yesterday, and due to some of the players being in they have been affected, they have got COVID. But do you think, when now the hindsight is available, but do you think that it was the right time to hold IPLs when the crisis situation is there in the country, and we have already had seen the experience of the elections taking place, and the Kumbh Mela, and of course these some of these things were happening simultaneously, the decision making man. But do you think IPL should have been organized?
I agree that the situation is very dire and the need of organizing mass events is something we should have thought upon. However, when the initial idea of organizing IPL was floated, it was decided that the entire IPL would be organized in a single region only, in Maharashtra only, and the matches will be shifted from Mumbai to Pune only. However, in the later stages, it was decided that many states lobbied for their stadium. So then it was decided that the matches will be scheduled in different states. That was something I believe should have been avoided because the traveling involved in Ahmedabad, Maharashtra, and then to Delhi, it was quite a risky situation. So I believe that was something we should have avoided at this time.
Okay, so physics was one of your subjects. So I will just ask a very mundane question from physics. You know, when you are going to receive a relative at a railway station, then you are advised to stay away from the railway tracks. Why is it that you should stay away from the railway tracks? On the platform, you are asked to stay away slightly. Why? There is some principle of physics which tells you that if you stay too near the track on the platform, this is going to happen. What is that?
Uh, uh, is it a principle of inertia because the body tends to remain in the state?
No, you are standing there. So there is no question of change. There is no question of change of motion. I mean, inertia, you are in a state of stationary. Okay, this is why I'm asking you, because the physics, there will be a lot many questions which may be asked to you. So the principle is Bernoulli's principle. You know, since the train is moving at a certain speed, the more the speed, the pressure comes down. So you will be attracted towards the railway tracks because there will be a partial vacuum between you and the train. So you are likely to fall on the railway tracks. And one more question before I switch over to the next panelist is, why do you think, elementary mundane thing, why the traffic signal, the stop signal is red and the proceed signal is green? The color, why is it made that? Why red color for stopping and why green color for moving ahead?
The wavelength of red color is longest. Red color has the longest wavelength, and it has scattered least. So the possibility of observing red color from the far off distance it increases. And
In the case of red color. Okay, so you said that the scattering is much less in the case of red color, and therefore you are in a position to see the red color. Yeah, and the similar question would be why the sky is blue. So the same principle applying there, why sky is blue would apply, because the scattering of the blue color is much more, and therefore you can see the sky blue. Last question. Okay, so with rising coronavirus cases, the vaccine acceptance has been abysmally low in this country. So why is it, as compared to other countries, the acceptance of the vaccine was rather low in this country? That is why people were not coming. Somehow people were not coming forward, and there were many hospitals where if the capacity was 1,000 patients, only hardly 500 patients were coming. So why was this vaccine hesitancy? And second question, why is it that there is a hesitancy in other countries regarding the Indian made vaccines?
Yes, sir. It is true that vaccine hesitancy has been a problem in coronavirus pandemic, and there are multiple reasons behind that. One is the cultural reason, because we have seen that during polio vaccination also, there was skepticism regarding vaccines because of the information asymmetry prevailing between the communities. And at present, social media and mass media also have a role to play in that, because social media acts like a echo chamber. So the information which is sometimes not verified much, and the ill effects are attributed to vaccines. So many people belonging to rural areas, they believe that the ill effects of vaccine are more as compared to positive effects. So they are hesitate hesitated when it comes to vaccine. Also, some cultural taboos are associated with vaccines. For example, in certain religions, it is believed that women should not take vaccine during their menstruation period. So these sort of reasons also contribute to vaccine hesitancy. And talking about the hesitancy for Indian vaccines in abroad, the effect of, I'd say, the mass media and social media, there has been some skepticism. There has been news of some ill effect which have been falsely attributed to vaccine, I would say, because many a times even PIB recently introduced a fact check where it verified various information where the side effect of vaccine were amplified and were misinformed to the common public. So in foreign media also, there were certain reports about Indian vaccines that they are not much effective and they have certain side effects. So perception management is something I believe is the reason.
Okay, thank you, Adarsh. Dagarji.
Others, why civil service? Why do you want to join civil service?
So as a citizen of this country, I've always wanted to contribute to my nation's development. But during the course of my graduation, I realized that scientific research is something where my intrigue does not lie. I realized that I am more interested.
Can you repeat that? What was that sentence?
Sir, in the course of my graduation, when I was doing BSc, I realized that my interest does not lie in scientific research. And I realized that I was more inclined toward policy making and administration. So I decided that I would drop MSc and I would go for full-fledged preparation of UPSC, because civil services on one hand would allow me the opportunity of contributing to my nation. On the other hand, at personal level, it would give me satisfaction, or I would say my interest lies in policy making. So on both of these fronts, civil services seem a pliable option.
But whose job is the policy making?
So policy making is the job of executives, the ministers who are there, and the job of civil servants is to advise or implement that policies.
And what is the role of legislature then?
So legislature passes the legislative orders, it makes the laws, and the executive then implements that laws. The legislature and executive in India, they are interrelated. The ministers who are part of executive, they are also the part of legislature. So legislature, the ministers, they make policies through the form of executive orders as well as legislative orders.
See, there are various committees of legislature, say in the case of parliament, for this very purpose, to scrutinize, to recommend, to draft, redraft. What are those committees?
So there are various parliamentary committees regarding implementation and verification of various government initiatives. For example, when it comes
to just 1 minute, implementation. Do you think the committees are supposed to oversee implementation?
No, sir, they are not supposed to oversee implementation, but they can see the progress or how the feasibility of that scheme. For example,
I'm talking about formulation of the law. What is their role in enactment of the law?
Sir, parliamentary committees scrutinize the draft of the various legislations.
Which are the committees?
So, for example, there is a committee called Parliamentary Committee on Subordinate Legislation, which ensures that the executive orders or executive bylaws are in conformity with the legislative enactments. And there's committee on government assurance. There is estimates committee, which scrutinizes the economic proposals and the budget provisions.
See, recently, in terms of these three laws, you remember the farmers are agitating in the sector of agriculture. One of the criticism was from the opposition side that they should have been sent to a committee of the parliament. What is that committee? What is the demand actually?
So actually,
what is the logic behind that?
So actually, if we see trend of last 3 to 4 years, the number of bills being referred to parliamentary standing committees has been declining. So what happens is that when a bill is not referred to parliamentary standing committee, it does not has a proper scrutiny, or I would say consensus between opposition and the ruling party, because in parliamentary committee, the opposition and ruling party members can give up their political inclination, and in a closed room discussion, they can point out certain lacuna of the laws and they can arrive at consensus. So the speedy laws, or I would say the hastily passed laws, they can be checked and verified at the parliamentary committee stage itself. And then it is up to the parliament whether it could consider those suggestions. So what happened was that opposition has been demanding that the farm laws should have been referred to parliamentary standing committee so that the limitations or the lacuna of that laws could have been discussed upon.
Look, tell me, there is a criticism of people who were holding the constitutional positions and given re-employment after that. What is your take on that?
Sorry, sir, can you repeat that question?
There are constitutional authorities positions,
Yes.
and many of them have been given re-employment after their tenure.
Yes.
The general criticism is that it should be avoided, or there should be a cooling off period of say 4 years, 5 years. What is your view on that?
So I believe that there should be a cooling off period because what happens is that the public, the constitutional bodies, they are dependent upon the trust between public and the constitutional authority, and the trust is a two-way street. What happens is that when a public trust is dependent upon the path taken by the constitutional dignitaries. For example, there are provisions in the constitution also which ensure that the independence of those constitutional bodies is maintained. For example, when it comes to election commission, it is assured that the reappointment to that office cannot happen. So these provisions have been made to ensure that the public trust is maintained. However, when there is a lack of proper time period between the retirement and the new employment, there the trust of public somewhat, I would say, there is an erosion of trust. So justice must not also be done; it should also seen to be done. Is something I believe. So public trust should be our priority, and there should be a cooling off period of certain time.
My last question. You are a police officer who has been recently posted in a district which is actually having more crime in comparison to your neighboring districts. You don't have actually any bias. You are a fresh. You are given 2 books, no mobile, no internet. You are given 2 books. You have to select one. One is the Indian Constitution, and second is IPC, Indian Penal Code, to use in your day-to-day affair. Which book you will prefer and why?
So I would prefer Indian Penal Code because Indian Constitution I have read that, and I am aware of the basic features of that Constitution, or I would say foundational feature of that Constitution, and what it aims to achieve. When it comes to IPC, it provides me the administrative framework under which I have to work. So I believe in pragmatic terms, IPC would be more suited for my day-to-day affairs.
Your answer was very good, but do you think IPC is about administration?
So IPC is about controlling law and order by ensuring that penal provisions are applied correctly. So IPC would serve to guide me as to what provision should I apply in relevant position. Without IPC, the legitimacy of my action can be questioned.
Can you tell me in one sentence what is there in IPC? What exactly is, what is there in IPC?
So IPC lays out the crimes which are there in the penal code and the penalty which can be applied to that crime, and what action, what maximum action, or what are the limitation on the authority which is imposing that penalty. So IPC mandates all that.
Definition of crime. Okay, thank you.
Gauri Shankarji.
Others, you have indicated that book reading is one of your hobbies.
Yes.
Which of the name one of the latest books you have read, and what are the takeaways from that book?
So I had recently read the autobiography of former Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Mr. C.G. Somaiya. It was titled "The Honest Always Stands Alone." And after reading that autobiography, I came to realize the challenges of day-to-day administration and how integrity and perseverance of authority can help to tide through the problems occurring in day-to-day affairs of administration.
Very good, very good. Now tell me, what is the law which governs the Indian corporate sector? Can you name the law?
So it is Companies Act, I believe, which governs the Indian corporate
Yeah,
sector.
the Indian Companies Act 1956.
Yes.
Okay, and do you understand what is corporate social responsibility?
Yes.
What it is and how it is enforced?
So corporate social responsibility is considered as an obligation of corporates to the entire society within the framework of which they are operating. It is believed that a section of their profit is to be attributed to the society because the cause of their profit is somewhat because of the society, because of the social structure they are operating in. So the obligation is in the form of monetary terms, and the CSR mandates that the companies have to keep 2% of their profits accruing in last 3 years. They have to keep in a designated CSR fund and spend that on physical infrastructure, intangible infrastructure like health and education, or the community within which they are operating.
All the companies are covered under this provision, or there's some exemption?
So there is a limit of profit as well as there is a limit of turnover on the basis of which a company is mandated to keep CSR. For example, if I recall correctly, the net profit should be above 5 crores. Only then a company is mandated to contribute to CSR.
Okay. Now, there is a phrase called oppression by minority. Oppression by minority in the companies, in the corporate world. What do you mean by that?
So actually in corporate world, the majority stakeholders, they have power of voting so that the decision of company are not detrimental to their affair. However, in recently we have seen that due to certain political as well as socio-economic constraint, the minority elites, they appropriate the entire decision-making structure of board of managers. So board of directors, I apologize. So the minority section, or I'd say the power elites, the term is often used. These power elites appropriate the decision-making of majority. So that is why the term the oppression by minority is used.
But isn't it true generally, because most of the shareholders, they neither attend the annual general body meeting nor do they participate in the election. It's normally 10 to 12% shareholders. They elect the board of directors and they rule the companies. Isn't it true across the board?
So I agree that the participation is not as majoritarian in nature, but the law, the Companies Act, it mandates that however small the contribution of a person is, the person has the voting right, or I'd say the decision-making right, in proportion to its contribution to that company. So oppression by minority is something we need to look upon, because despite the fact that the meetings are not regularly attended, we cannot take away the right of those who have legitimate right of decision making, be it they in my majority or be it in minority. We should give them their legitimate right. And the minority elites in the long term introduces the problem of connected lending and corporate misuse. We have seen in the example of ICICI Bank also that the elite, when the oppression by minority happens, in the long run, it creates a problem of slippery slope, due to which corruption often happens in the company.
In the recent past, there have been a lot of what we call, the bad debts in the banks. And some of the borrowers, large borrowers, have disappeared from the country. Why this happened and where was the mistake? How it can be corrected?
So if we go back to global financial crisis of 2008, in order to tackle the crisis, India had introduced regulatory forbearance. so that the corporates can be awarded some at concessional rates and the economic activity can be revived. However, it was seen that during that period of concessional rates and regulatory forbearance, the amount which was taken as loan was used for evergreening and the new assets were not created. Also, apart from that, the delay in environmental clearances and land acquisition problems have also created the problem of twin balance sheet, which was observed in the asset quality review of RBI. To an extent, the management of public sector banks is also a reason, because there was not a complete data profile of the borrowers. It was not looked upon, and the politicization of bank and the connected lending was also a reason. In order to solve this problem, we can introduce reforms at various levels. When it comes to public sector bank, we can introduce lateral entry, because it is seen that the salary and wages of the public sector bank employees, they are not dependent upon the performance of the bank. So we should introduce options like employee stockholder plan and lateral entry, so that the dynamism can be introduced in the public sector. When it comes
But don't you think that these large loans are given at behest of political considerations, and the poor employee sitting in the bank and even the director sitting in the bank has very little to say?
Yes, sir, I agree that those who are the smaller rungs or the lower end of the hierarchy in a bank structure, they should not bear the brunt because they do not have that decision-making capacity. So in order to ensure this, we should assure that the accountability of those who are at the top and who are sanctioning the loan amount, the accountability of those officials should be ensured, and there should be safeguard clause. When we introduce the lateral entry or the new provisions, there should be a safeguard clause which ensures that those who are at the bottom end of the hierarchy, they should not get a disproportionate penalty.
Okay, now going out of that, presently in London, the G7 summit is going on. What is this G7?
So G7 is a intergovernmental group of 7 developed countries. Earlier, Russia was also in that G7 group. However, at present, it is not there because of its annexation of Crimea. It consists of 7 countries, which are Japan, United States, Italy, Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, and France. So these 7 countries, they discuss and deliberate upon the issues which are particular to developed countries, or I would say the Western countries.
So these are the 7 industrialized democracies. Okay, now what is G20? There's another group called G20.
So the group G20 consists of the countries which are developing also. So developing countries which have a stake in the global affairs, they have come together to form the group of G20. It consists of countries like India and Australia, which are the middle power of the entire group. So while G7 consists of the advanced countries, G20 signifies the middle power coordination.
Okay, now coming back to India and its neighborhood, what is happening in Nepal in the recent past, and how do you evaluate India-Nepal relations?
So we have seen in the recent past our relations with Nepal have been seen some of the troubles. I would say there have been reasons which can be attributed to domestic politics of Nepal, as well as there are reasons which can be attributed to Chinese actions also. And some other recent disputes were related to boundary dispute between India and Nepal. And we have seen that Nepalese people, they have been apprehensive of Indian hegemony, because India is perceived as a big brother in Nepal. So Nepal is somehow intimidated by the Indian presence, and it shows the sign of being a sovereign entity. And I would say that there's a need to revisit the Indo-Nepal treaty, because the treaty, when it was formed for the purpose of friendship, it was governed in an entirely different political environment. And now, since Nepal has become somewhat autonomous of India, it regulates its own external affairs. We should provide some of the leverage to Nepal.
But
and
China is even a larger power and they have far more dominance there. Why don't they feel that China is hegemonistic? Why about India?
So there is a reason behind that. China has been aiding Nepal when it comes to financial in financial terms. When it comes to Indian projects in Nepal, the project like Mahakali project, which was there, our projects, the implementation of them have been somewhat slower if you compare them to China. China has been contributing to Nepal in a much significant manner. For example, in Nepalese school at the very bottom level, Chinese are introducing financial aids, and even the children, they are being taught Mandarin language. So China has been circulating Nepal from the all levels, political, economic, as well as socio-institutional level. So India needs to up its ante, and its need to implement this project much faster rate, so that the apprehension regarding to Indian aid can be reduced.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Harish ji.
Adarsh, you are a science graduate.
Yes, sir.
Tell me the difference between an observation and scientific observation, or a fact and a scientific fact.
So an observation is something a common man can observe. For example, it is based upon our day-to-day knowledge and commonsensical observation, and it is a knowledge which is taken for granted. For example, if I observe the sky, I take it for granted. I do not deliberate, or I do not reflect upon it. However, when it comes to scientific observation is based upon certain precepts. For example, the observation which a scientific researcher is making, that observation should be reflected upon, and that observation should comply with certain scientific precepts. For example, it should be empirical. It should have an empirical backing. And a common observation sees only at the surface, but a scientific observation goes beyond the surface and sees the scientific context within which an observation is taking place.
Now, I beg to slightly different. I'll give you another example. Let's say if someone says that without Mahatma Gandhi, India would not have become independent. Is that an observation or a scientific observation?
So I'd say it is an observation.
Why not? I mean, it seems to be true. It's and it
observation-
may be actually a true. Tell me why it is not scientific.
So observation usually have an element of value loading, while scientific observation tends to eliminate that value loading in the observation by introducing a fact-based analysis and arriving at a general consensus. When it comes to the fact of Mahatma Gandhi, it might be true that this fact may be true, but the general consensus to this fact might be something that people will beg to differ. And the value element might be there also, because the people, they have a different values, but scientific observation takes into account only objective values.
I think there is one additional element. It's called verification.
True, sir.
Whether Gandhiji was responsible for independence, I mean, there's no way of verifying it. Therefore, it's not scientific. Otherwise, they both are observation. Okay. Now you've done physics and chemistry. Tell me, what is this hype about nanotechnology? What makes it so, so useful in every field?
So when it comes to science, the breakthrough was achieved because of the introduction of quantum technology. So when a particle, when we reduce its size, its properties also changes. And it has been seen when a particle is reduced to its 10 to the power minus 9 times dimension of its actual size, the nano particle which results, it has an entirely different properties from the original particle.
No, but
So
what
this-
is it? Was it why it is like this one? For example, is molecular weight, atomic weight, etc. are same. So why the property changes?
So because the quantum effect, they are visible only when the dimension of particle is small enough. They are the effects like quantum tunneling and the effects like quantum entanglement, they cannot be observed in the molecular form. When we reduce particle to much smaller extent, they can be visible. Also, the nano-sized particles, they can be introduced inside the molecular, the inside body cavity, and they can be introduced in certain instruments where they are not visible and they are not bulky in nature.
No, but apart from visibility, what is the key things which is responsible for this additional property that you are telling me about? It is surface area. You know, when you reduce it in size, the enormous increase in surface area. Because of that, many of these things to happen.
Thank you, sir.
What is Inspire Fellowship?
So Inspire Fellowship is awarded by Department of Science and Technology, and it is called Innovation in Science and Pursuit for Inspired Research. It is awarded to those who tend to aspire for scientific research or create their career in the scientific research, and it is awarded to those who are in top 1% of their respective board examination of intermediates.
Okay. Now you are discussing with sir about why sky is blue and why signals are red or green. One more question in that line: why milk is white? What makes it? What gives it white color? And this relates to your physics and chemistry.
So turbidity in milk, I would say.
Milk is not turbid. You don't call it turbid. Anyway, you just think about it. Now we, as India, we are completing 75 years of independence. We are very close to that. How India has fared in terms of science and technology? What have we learned? What we could have learned, but we haven't learned. So where do we stand as far as science and technology is concerned when we are approaching 75th anniversary of our independence?
So India has seen a leaps and bounds progress in science and technology when we compare it to independence era. The science and technology sphere has been contributed by advent of institutions like Indian Institution of Science, Tata Institution for Fundamental Research. We have seen breakthroughs in space technology. We have seen breakthroughs in quantum technology and nanotechnology. So there has been a sense of greater development when it comes to scientific research. However, our contribution, the contribution of research and development in the entire GDP is not up to the standard of a developing country. So this is lacuna, I would say. Another problem has been the delays in the grant to scientific institutions. So this has also affected the temperament, or I'd say the entire scientific ecosystem in our country. And lastly, I would like to make a point that our innovation has been incremental in nature. The disruptive innovation has not been much significant, but the incremental innovation has been there.
And what do you attribute that? Why it is slow and sluggish?
So one of the reasons, as I said, that was the lack of funding in the scientific area. Second, I would say the research in India is more from the point of view of publication in reputed journals. So this is why it is considered very risky that a person or a scientific researcher pursues the areas which are entirely new. So usually researchers, they prefer to operate in those areas where the chances of publication are high because of the.
Okay, fine, but that can be changed with the policy. Anyway, what is scientific temperament?
So scientific temperament is evaluation of our day-to-day affairs by the view of rationality and objectivity, because these two are the pillars of scientific.
Yeah, so how have we fared in learning from the scientific temperament? Have we imbibed those concepts, principles in our day-to-day life, even our governance?
So to a certain level, I would say we have fared when it compared it to our independence era, because now a common public is more aware of the scientific terms, and the superstitions they were associated earlier, they have been somewhat reducing with the advent of literacy and educational attainment. However, we have seen that the taboos like vaccine hesitancy and the taboo associated with menstruation, they have been there. So we need to emphasize more in that area when it comes to scientific.
Yeah, but are our government decisions based on scientific temperament, scientific thought process?
Yes, our government has been progressing in that direction. It has been backed its decision with scientific objectives.
Okay, and final questions. Have you heard the word, phrase, League of Nations?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
So League of Nations was established in the aftermath of World War I in order to ensure that there is a peace and security in a post-war world. It was based upon the Woodrow Wilson's 14-point charter. and it was dominated by countries like Britain, France, Italy, and Japan. United States was not a part of that League of Nations.
So does it exist now?
No, sir, it does not exist. The United
I-
States has been its successor, I would say.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Krishna sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Adarsh. So, what are the qualities of an Adarsh officer?
So I believe first quality is that of integrity. An officer must be have the conduct of integrity in its personal as well as professional competence. Secondly, I'd say perseverance, because when an officer is doing his duties, there are many problems which come in the day-to-day affairs. So perseverance is the second most important bit. Lastly, I would say emotional intelligence is something which is needed in an officer, because sometimes even an officer is subjected to emotional extremes, so it can affect his decision making.
Okay. So, you are quite into the cricket. So, can you tell me what is the difference between no ball and dead ball?
So
I want technical definition, not just a simple answer. Okay, tell me clearly what is the difference between no ball and dead ball.
So first of all, the rules of no ball clearly necessitate that the line, there should not be overstepping of line. There are clearly stipulated procedures like the ball should not hit a batsman above his waist. So these are some of the procedures associated with the no ball. When it comes to dead ball covers those areas which were not covered by no ball. All the areas which exclude these two criteria, they are covered in dead ball. For example, if a batsman is not ready and the bowler has delivered the ball, it is considered to be a dead ball. Also, since the ball is expected to reach the batsman at one tip, when a ball reaches to batsman at more than one tip, it is again considered as a dead ball. So all those criteria which was not included in the criteria of no ball, they are covered in the dead ball. Even when
I think you have to. Others, this is a wrong definition. Dead ball is something when the ball ceases to be in state of play. So let's say if it is in the hands of the wicket keeper also, then it is a dead ball. And no ball is an illegal delivery or an illegal ball for which there are certain rules. Okay, let's go ahead. Can you tell me something about man cutting?
So marketing is usually a tactic used by a bowler when a batsman passes through a crease, even when a bowler has not delivered the ball. So what bowlers usually do is that he can run out a batsman. It is named after Mr. Binu Market. So it is believed that when a ball was expected to have been delivered, then a batsman must within his crease. For example, when a bowler does not deliver a ball when it was expected to deliver, then he cannot mankade the batsman.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions about morality of this act. Do you support this act or you oppose this act?
So I support mankade because I believe that it provides unfair advantage to the batsman when he crosses the crease before the delivery of a ball. And it can be crucial when, for example, at the last ball, 1 or 2 runs are required. Then such small differences can be crucial to the result of the game.
Okay. So let's say I am a fast pacer of India. I am a fast bowler, and I want to reverse swing a ball. So can you tell technique how to reverse swing a ball?
So first of all, we need to ensure that the ball is hold enough in order to provide reverse swing. And what we can do is one half of the ball, it is can be provided with saliva, I would say, so that it becomes more and more smooth. And the second half of the ball, it is ensured that it has a rougher area. So what happens is that we take the seam of the ball, for example, towards the fine leg. So in conventional setting, it is believed that it will result in an in-swing of the ball. However, when the pressure difference is quite large due to the difference between roughness of the two sides, instead of in-swinging, the pressure differences due to Bernoulli theorem, the pressure differences causes the ball to swing outwards instead of in-swing. So outwards swing operates.
Okay. So let's move out of cricket and talk about UP. See, state of UP is quite large, and there has been several demands multiple times that state should be bifurcated. So do you think that it is the right time that state should be divided into 4 parts or as many parts as has been demanded?
Sir, at present, I would say that it is not that desirable to bifurcate or divide a state to multiple parts, because if we go back and look at the position of state 7 or 8 years ago, there was a development divide between various regions of Uttar Pradesh. For example, Bundelkhand and Purvanchal, they were not much developed as compared to Rohilkhand area. But at present, with the advent of Eastern Freight Corridor and defense corridors, also Purvanchal Expressway and Bundelkhand Expressway have been introduced. The need of bridging development divide has been somewhat bridged by the present government. So at present, I do not see much feasibility of this demand. Also, the ground reality, the people's demand,
Okay.
is somewhat softened with the latest development. Sorry, sir.
Okay. So you are from Barabanki. Can you tell me 3 problems of Barabanki?
Yes, sir. The first problem, what I believe, is that of malnutrition, because Barabanki ranks among the bottom 15 districts of Uttar Pradesh when it comes to malnutrition categories. Secondly, I would say the problem of female literacy in rural areas is quite high, because there the female literacy is only 50%. And lastly, I would say the Barabanki has been a pioneer in methanol production and in the food production. But the progress of food processing industry has been somewhat below standard because of the problem in legal dispute related to land. So land titling and legal dispute related to land is somehow we need to tackle so that industrial activity can be promoted in that district.
Okay. Can you quickly tell me how you would resolve these problems?
So,
Given a chance, how you will resolve these problems?
sir, I would start with the land titling problem. What I have personally observed is that one of the major issues is that the land records are not updated regularly. So digitization of land record is something we can try. Also, there is a notion of
But that is
presumptive
good.
land.
That is going
For
on
example-
from years. Digitization is going on from the years. There has been no success in digitization.
Sir, but in Barabanki, the pace of digitization has been quite low. If an industry tends to acquire land, it often comes into some legal trouble, because somewhere down the line a person comes and challenges the ownership of that land. So industries often avoid taking land in Barabanki. Also, we can try conclusive land titling, because the present land titling is presumptive in nature, which relates to the previous owner of the land. We can shift to conclusive land titling so that any of the future legal dispute is with the state and not with the present owner. Present owner can continue with their activity. When it comes to malnutrition, I would say the problem of malnutrition and rural female literacy, they are interrelated, because Barabanki has most of its portion lying in the rural areas. So the females who are in rural areas, they face problem in access to nutritional food. They do not have access to fortified food. Also, the poverty prevention in rural areas, it also prohibits women from having a diversified diet. So we have to tackle literacy and malnutrition in, I would say, assimilated approach.
Okay, fine. So I have one just final question. Can you tell me recently there was Kumbh in news. So what is difference between Ardh Kumbh and Mahakumbh?
So Earth Kumbh, as the name suggests, it is not based upon the cycle. For example, the cycle of Kumbh is that of 12 years, and these 3 years, it moves from place to place. Total, there are 4 venues. However, when it comes to Earth Kumbh, it does not follow the entire cycle of 4 years or 12 years. It is Ardh Kumbh, for example, which means that instead of 4 years or 12 years, it follows half the time cycle. So at present, the Earth Kumbh is there in Uttarakhand, but in Uttar Pradesh, the Kumbh is celebrated after the 4 years. So this is Mahakumbh. So time duration is the fundamental difference.
Okay.
What about Mahakumbh?
So Mahakumbh happens when the timeline of 4 years has lapsed. Then it happens, and also the position of sun, Uttarayana, it is said that the sun enters the Capricorn. Then it is celebrated, Mahakumbh. Then it is celebrated.
I think, sir, Sir may take over now.
Okay.
He is good communication skills. The only thing is, I don't know actually whether it is because of the speakers or it looks actually sometimes it is high pitched sort of you see the responses, so he can you see lower a bit the space of that. I'm not very sure. We have to ask him actually what is the reason. It's not look like he's debating. Otherwise, he's good. His knowledge base is good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he's good.
it's good. And he's answering actually most of the questions.
Yeah,
with best
absolutely.
ability.
Yeah. Thank you. Gauri Shankar ji.
I agree with Dagur Saab. I find him very good. He has good knowledge base and has answered question with confidence.
Okay. Thank you. Harish ji.
I think this is what I call very good. Absolutely
Not the previous one.
much above the previous one.
Yes.
Thank you. Vipul ji.
I think he is good. I mean, he has good technical knowledge about cricket. Almost all the answers except one he answered quite well. So he's well.
Okay.
He can be one of the candidate where you can say that he will be selected.
Right.
Hopefully, yes.
हमको डॉक्टर साहब ऐसा लगता
Harish ji, your evaluation can be very dangerous. It can be gender biased.
well, politically incorrect, yes.
Harish, you were asking something.
No, I was telling कि ऐसा लग रहा है कि आपकी बार कुछ ज्यादा ही अच्छे बच्चे आ रहे हैं. Last time.
When you
compared to
compare with the last year, yes, definitely they are better.
I think there are a good number of people who are really very good. We develop a confidence in them now.
You see, last year, daily, at least in the case of one or two candidates, we were telling main kaise pass kiya. This time, actually, in the last 5-6 days, it is only one candidate where we were not very happy with the performance. Otherwise, they are doing very well this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also think that he was very good, exceptionally good. And he had perhaps all the qualities to make a good officer. And he has a good, fair chance to get selected in the final results.
I think maybe something to do with Pratyush and Unacademy that they are able to attract better lot this time.
Yeah. Okay. So we can call him.
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Adarsh, are you in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Adarsh, at the moment, first of all, let me ask you, what is your response? What is your reaction to the last about 30-35 minutes of mock interview? How do you rate yourself?
Sir, I'd say I need to work more upon the science aspect of my knowledge because I need to study more in scientific aspect, and I should deliberate more in my mind for answering that question. These two things I believe I should work upon.
Okay. So just a small input from our side. I think you were very good and you had a good knowledge base and you had good skills as far as your presentation, your arguments and the answers which you were giving. So the second skill part was also quite good and your body language, everything was quite appropriate. And it was overall a good presentation of the various arguments. Your response to the questions were also quite good and correct also. And technical knowledge also was very good. So basically it is that you stand a fairly good chance of getting selected. And since there is still some time left and you can perhaps, work in that direction. And just one thing, passing thing, there is no doubt that on the point which I'm telling you, anyone is going to take umbrage to that. I'm not at all trying to suggest that. But you see, the pronunciation of one or two English words, since your interview will be conducted in English, for example, hierarchy, you said hierarchy.
Yes.
Now that is hierarchy. Okay. And similarly, you probably said hegemony.
Yes.
Hegemony. Now that is hegemony. No, not at all. It does not have any reflection on what you said. I'm only trying to tell you that these are some of the things, probably you could, since you were using these two words quite often. So I was listening to that. I thought that probably you can, the pronunciation of some of the words, you can just think about it. Not at all to belittle your answers or your knowledge or your intelligence. The way of presenting, you are exceptionally good. Every one of us feel that you have not only fair but excellent chance of ultimately securing in that direction. So just keep up this good work that you are doing. Go on studying, and there will be no doubt that you are going to come out successfully. Just one parting thing. Do you pronounce your surname as Shukla or Shukla? Because there are two types. Normally. Generally, the thing accepted in Uttar Pradesh is that the male candidates, they pronounce as Shukla, and the females they call Shukla. But what is that? So what is that? You call as Shukla?
Yes, sir. In Hindi, I use the term Shukla, the term Shukla. But when I'm conversing in English, they often use the Shukla.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely correct. So that also is absolutely fine. So overall, I think you carry the best wishes from all the panelists, and they feel very highly about you, and so do I. And I would definitely feel that you stand a fairly good chance. Just keep up. Don't be complacent, because sometimes after hearing good words about oneself, one tend to become complacent, and you are surely to come. So my best wishes to you.
Thank you, sir.
So best
Anything
wishes
you
from
would
us.
like to ask?
Just one sentence I would like to add when you spoke about Nepal and India. The language should have been little moderate. You should have said that Nepal is, located or between the two big powers, that is China and India, and there is a little bit, play of imbalance here and there. So you should have used that word rather than using the word hegemony or, that kind of thing.
Okay. So Adarsh, anything you would like to ask us?
Sir, I have a question that should I focus more on the scientific aspect? I say my BSc knowledge. To what extent should I study my BSc syllabus for the interviews?
I think,
if I can say
go
this.
ahead. Go ahead, Harish.
I think as far as the science, technical part of the science is concerned, you're fine. I asked you nanotechnology and all those things. That's fine. Colored, all those things are fine. What you can dwell on is this difference between, you see, what India has gained from science and technology is all this kind of products, we all use. India has done very well in using them. But not in manufacturing of them. So scientific products, we are using them, and that creates a market, but it also needs a manufacturing base. That's one thing. And second thing is the scientific temperament. That science teaches us two things, technology, which gives us products, but also scientific temperament. And if we use that in all spheres of our lives, I think we can eliminate half of the problem just by being scientific in our individual decisions, in our family, social decisions, and at governance. So these two things, if you can keep, technically you are okay. You don't have to worry about the concepts of physics and chemistry. That is okay.
Okay, thank you. So all the best to you, Adarsh.
Thank you, sir.
Unacademy. Let's crack it.